All right, so this is your first set of lecture notes. A couple things as we get started on you having to listen to lecture from home. First and foremost, make sure that you've got out your copy of notes if I've given them to you. Take your own notes on them. Write down questions if you have questions for me, so you can ask in class, or that you can email me if need be, if you're not going to see me the next day or whatever it is. And then if I tell you to write something down, write it down, okay? So we are in a biological science, anatomy and physiology. Specifically with anatomy, that definition, we're going to study the structures and formations of organisms, and obviously in this case specifically studying the human body and its structures. And then physiology is the study of how organisms function, and so of course again we're going to specifically study the functions of the human body. We could study plant anatomy, plant physiology. We could study those with other animals as well, for example, okay, focusing on humans here. As we go through the year, we're going to split up, we're going to split up the year into different systems of the body. Know that they are all connected. We might not see a direct connection and understand a direct connection at all times, but they are all connected. Some of our connections are going to be much more easily understood for you guys than others. Another major theme is going to be homeostasis, right? Maintenance of internal stability. So basically our bodies need to remain in check in order for us to be healthy. More to come on that. We're going to deal with homeostatic mechanisms in each unit. Again, I'm not necessarily going to be that person that says homeostasis every single day, but know that this is a major theme, okay? And that's going to tie into that chemical processes and even physics, okay, that our bodies are constantly changing from a chemical standpoint. Physics is involved in everything you do all day long. So that being said, we have a direct connection to those two disciplines when we're discussing anatomy and physiology, but a lot of people don't see that, okay? So two of my goals are to get you to understand overall connections in your own body, homeostatic mechanisms being important, and a problem with one system may cause a problem with another system, let's just say, and then the ties that we have to chemistry and physics as well. All right, I'm just going to slide this up. Okay, so this next section, typically we just kind of do quickly in class, and then be reiterating it, but just so you have a point of reference at home. Sorry, I can't get that straight for some reason. Okay, so anatomical position. This is our reference body position. And this woman over here on the right is in anatomical position. So notice that she's standing upright. Her shoulders and face are forward. Her feet are basically together, okay? They're just, barely apart. Her arms are at her sides with her palms facing forward, and the fingers are typically spread apart. Okay, so regardless of body position, you refer back to anatomical position. So this woman all balled up in the bed, okay, asleep. She is in a ball, but you have to imagine her standing up and standing just like the woman here, okay? So that this is her right arm, okay, on the top. That's her left arm, okay? Left arm on this woman, right arm on this woman. Okay, and then another example, just these two girls are seated opposite each other and touching hands. So the girl that's over here on the left in the picture, her left hand is here, okay? The girl that is seated on the right, her right hand is there. It's just like mirror when you're facing somebody, okay? It's your mirror images of each other. That's really important when you think about descriptions from a medical standpoint. Let's say that you are a surgeon and you are supposed to do some sort of surgery on this woman's left shoulder, okay, but you accidentally do it on the right because you're not referring to anatomical position. Kind of a big problem there, okay? Pause for a second. All right, so that YouTube link, that will obviously be on Google Classroom. You need to watch that. It's just a quick video about anatomical position. The planes of the body, these are going to, you can see them here in the picture on the left. These are going to, again, be in reference to anatomical position. This is going to deal with body structures, with movements, with organs, basically everything you can deal with planes, okay? So planes, one thing to think of, or to think about, is that they don't automatically create a half to the body. So the example that I gave you here, and this is a woman where we can see the pelvic region that I've highlighted or darkened, where the transverse section was made on this little diagram. So if a woman's having a baby and she's having a C-section, they make a tiny little transverse section in the pelvic region, okay? A full transverse section in the pelvic region would basically chop her apart right there, all right? So it can be a small section. It doesn't have to be the entire body. It's just a plane and a point of reference. So we're going to deal with 4 different planes, and the color on here is the same as the color in the diagram, essentially, okay? So let's start with the coronal or the frontal plane. So those terms are interchangeable. You can give me either one as an answer, but you have to know, like if I only put coronal plane on a test question and you only know frontal, then if you say, Miss Zellmer, I've got a question, what's a coronal plane? I'm just going to kind of ignore you because you should know that they're interchangeable, okay? So the blue plane is going to divide the body or an organ into an anterior and a posterior section, okay, as you can see there. And you've got your horizontal or your transverse plane, which is the same thing that I used as the example up here. Again, interchangeable. You've got to know both. So this is the red plane that divides the body or the organ into a superior and an inferior section. Then your sagittal plane, which it's kind of orange here, looks a little more yellow there in the writing. This divides the body or the organ into a left and a right side. And then specifically a mid-sagittal plane. Sometimes you see median, which is what's in the diagram, but we're going to use mid-sagittal. This divides the body into equal left and right halves. So that's going straight down the middle of your body versus you could do a sagittal plane a little bit offset, as you see here in the diagram. Okay. And then I am not going to go through a ton with this because I need you to watch that video link that's down here, the directional body terms, but I paired these by color. So anterior is interchangeable in humans with ventral, and posterior is interchangeable with dorsal. So you can use both of those, and you need to know that they're interchangeable. If we were, and that is because we are bipedal, we walk on 2 legs. If you think of your dog or your cat, they have a top, their back is their dorsal side, their belly is their ventral side, their head end is their anterior end, and their rear end is the posterior end. Okay, where we don't have that. We have a ventral or an anterior or front side. Our posterior or our dorsal side is our back side. The top of our head is the most superior aspect of our body. The bottom of our feet is the most inferior aspect of the body. Then lateral and medial. Okay, medial is going to refer to that median plane essentially, and then lateral, if you refer back to anatomical position, the woman in the picture, her thumbs are kind of the most lateral thing in that picture on her body, or lateral structure on her body. Distal and proximal, and this is when you definitely need to watch the video to understand all of these, but these 2 I think you definitely need to watch it to understand them better at this point. So point of attachment is going to refer to essentially your shoulder joint, okay, your shoulder girdle, and your hip joint or your hip girdle. So where your leg, okay, your thigh attaches to your hip, and where the top of your arm attaches to your shoulder, right? The closer it is to that point of attachment, the more proximal the structure is. The further away it is from the point of attachment, the more distal it is. Okay, so I'm going to give one example. The video gives better ones. Your ankle is more distal than your knee. Your knee is more proximal than your ankle. Okay, more examples in the video. Watch it. Okay, it's important. Deep versus superficial. Okay, so deep, so your organs inside your body are deep compared to your skin that is superficial. Okay, hopefully that one's kind of self-explanatory. All right, and so that being said, watch the video. Okay, this right here, this says body cavities and overview of organ systems. I don't typically really explain a whole lot with this. You're going to cover this through your introductory packet. So you've got a little diagram here that's just got a little diagram of all the different body systems. I know you can't really see it very well. And then this is your body cavities. You've got a dorsal body cavity and a ventral body cavity, and then those are then further subdivided. So y'all deal with that more through your packet, and I'll let that explain it, and that's going to be good for that for now. Okay. All right, let me switch to homeostasis. All right, so homeostasis, again, it's going to be a major theme. So this is the body's ability to maintain a stable, optimal internal environment. So we're referring to dynamic equilibrium. When I teach biology, I use the phrase dynamic equilibrium. Dynamic, if you don't know that word, that might be one to write down. Dynamic means changing, okay? So our bodies are constantly in flux. They are constantly changing, okay? Yet, we need to keep body systems in check. Okay, so this says internal conditions are changing within a narrow range to maintain stability as changes occur in the environment, right? The two systems that are going to basically kind of drive homeostasis are obviously the nervous system, because it controls all body functions, and then the endocrine system, okay? The endocrine system produces hormones, and of course we hear the word hormone and most people's brains go to sex hormones, where your body's producing hormones all the time that have nothing to do with ovaries and testes. We're not just talking testosterone and estrogen, for example, tons of other hormones, like adrenaline is a hormone. So that being said, I gave you endocrine system notes, okay, that I'm not going to lecture on, but they need to be a point of reference for you all year long, okay? Because what we'll do is we'll cover the endocrine glands and their secretions, whatever hormone it is that they secrete, within the organ system where it's appropriate to talk about that. Okay, so we'll do reproductive hormones when we cover reproduction. We will cover a gland, for example, called the pineal gland when we do the nervous system. I'm gonna point to the brain there. The pineal gland, excuse me, looks like a little pine nut, and it secretes a hormone called melatonin that's responsible for your sleep and wake cycles, just as one example. So that's going to be one of those PowerPoints that you just can always pull back to as a point of reference for hormones. We split that up over the course of the year. Okay, so all of that being said, for any homeostatic control mechanism, there are three major components to it: the receptor, the control center, and the effector. Okay, so your receptor is typically a nerve ending somewhere in your body, okay, and it's sensitive to some sort of environmental change or stimulus. Now that environmental change may be outside of the body or inside of the body, okay? Maybe outside temperature, right? A cold day versus a hot day, that's an external environmental stimulus. And stimulus can also be something that's happening inside your body. Okay, so you have a nerve ending or receptor that's going to be sensitive to that. It's going to send a signal to the control center. Okay, and when we get to the nervous system, we'll talk about that pathway. The control center is going to be the brain. It's going to receive and process the information from the receptor. And then it's going to send a response, okay, to that stimulus. Right, so you have the stimulus, the receptor senses that, sends a signal to the brain or the control center. Our brain or control center processes that, and then it sends a response back to the effector, the organ or the gland that's going to respond, okay, somehow. What's going to happen is either the original stimulus is either going to be enhanced or it's going to be opposed, essentially. Okay, so we have two different feedback mechanisms in general: negative and positive. So negative feedback mechanisms are much more common in the body than positive feedback mechanisms, okay? And this is basically to just keep those constant changes in flux, or those constant changes from staying in a narrow range of flux, okay? A little bit of change, right? We don't want a lot of change. So negative versus positive feedback. So negative feedback is going to occur when that effector organ or gland that's activated by the brain produces a response that either opposes or negates the original stimulus, okay? So let's talk about sweating. If you were in class, I would say, why do you sweat? Well, hopefully we all know that we sweat because our body temperature increases, and in order to keep that in check, we produce sweat through our sweat glands, goes to the surface of your body, and then it evaporates, and that cools us down, okay, and brings our body temperature back down. So that's a good example of negative feedback, okay, and I'm going to draw you some little graphs in just a second. And then another example, your blood sugar being controlled by the hormones insulin and glucagon. So for example, let's pretend that as you're listening to this, you're eating something with a lot of sugar in it. Just keep it simple. Candy, cookies, something like that. So you take in all this food, right? And then as a result, you've got all this extra sugar in your blood. Insulin is going to take that sugar and move it into your cells, okay? Responding to that. So it takes the high level of sugar in your blood, moves it out of your blood, and decreases the level of that sugar in your blood, moves it to your cells so that your cells can use it as energy, okay? And then glucagon does the opposite. Basically, it takes stored sugar and moves it into your bloodstream when you need more sugar in your blood, okay? That one may be kind of hard to understand for now, but the sweating is typically pretty easy to understand because we tend to know a lot about that. The other type of feedback is positive feedback. So this occurs when the effector organ or gland that's activated again by the brain or the control center produces a response that enhances or amplifies the original stimulus. Okay, so these are two good examples. I'll start with blood clotting. Let's say you go outside and you fall down, you scrape your knee, okay? You're bleeding. You're going to have a type of cell called a platelet that's going to get drawn to that area because of a chemical signal. As platelets come to that area that you've just skinned up your knee, okay, then more hormones are going to be produced. That's going to bring more platelets. More hormones come, more platelets come, or more hormones are produced. Then more platelets come to the area. More hormones are produced. It's a continuous cycle until you have a nice little scab, right? The other example here, when women are breastfeeding and they are making milk, as long as they keep breastfeeding, they're going to keep making milk, okay? And so essentially a baby feeds and then milk's gone, woman starts to build up the next supply, okay? And then that's hormonally controlled, and then the baby feeds, and again, hormones are going to trigger the new supply for the next feeding. Just a continuous cycle, okay? So negative feedback mechanisms, just to make this really simple. Can you even see that? Let me scoot it up a little bit. Okay, so negative feedback mechanisms, if you were to graph these, if you have an initial increase, okay, like sweating, okay, there's your graph, and then you sweat and your body temperature decreases, okay? So then if you have a drop in blood sugar, let's say, and then glucagon moves sugar into your blood to increase that, your graphs are basically going to look like a peak or a valley, okay? There will be a directional change, and I'm going to just write that down too. Okay, then positive feedback, there's no directional change, okay? So again, we need to form a scab, for example, with blood clotting, okay? So more platelets, more hormones, more platelets, more hormones, okay? Your change could be that something is decreasing as well, a constant decrease, right? So the trend continues in the same direction it's enhanced or amplified for a positive feedback mechanism. This is enhancing or amplification as well. If you have a decrease, that decrease continues to be enhanced or amplified even in positive, okay? That sometimes is kind of confusing to think about. The negative, again, your graph would look like a directional change is occurring. An increase and then a decrease, okay? Because it's opposing or negating the stimulus, and then the opposite situation, or no, sorry, I just said that, okay? But then, so it can basically be a peak or a valley is kind of how to think of it with a graph, okay? So if you have any questions about that, let me know.